Hello again and welcome to another Warhammer 40k Imperial Guard video, continuing with 8th edition reveals and what they mean for the Imperial Guard. That's what we will be doing today. Today we will be looking at the new unit profile reveal that Games Workshop has unveiled to us, and it's going to be interesting. All I can say, I have some reservations. I'm not going to lie. I think there's some absolutely corking things in here, which is great. I also have some reservations, like I said. But let's get into it first. Let's as always let's go through it bit by bit and work out how what each bit is and how it affects the guard. So, as mentioned in the movement video, the new edition, the rules, are basically, the new edition of rules is going to try and represent individual units more clearly, and will be, each unit will be fairly unique rather than there being unit types. So, Space Marine Infantry Squad member will move very differently to a Necron Infantry Squad movement member, or an Imperial Guard squad member, I should say. So that's fine. I'm all for them, adding a bit more depth, hopefully, and I'm all for them making each faction more unique and stand out a bit more. I am all for that. However, I do feel like Guard will probably end up getting the short end of the stick in terms of stats, because, as we all know, Guardsmen are generally quite shitty. So I'm really hoping that if our guys are terrible, then at least we'll be able to get lots of them. That's what I'm hoping for. So let's have a look. Like this. So let's just go through it. So as they've said, better distinguish different units, blah blah blah. One big change is to vehicles. Vehicles now are like monstrous creatures, essentially. Everyone has the same unit stats. So the example they give is the similarity between a tactical squad and a dreadnought. Both have a movement stat, both have weapon skill, ballistic skill, both have strength. The new thing is now both have toughness. So no longer is a dreadnought AV 12, 12, 10. A dreadnought is very simply toughness 7 and it has 8 wounds. That's pretty cool. Interestingly, the dreadnought here has a leadership value. That is interesting. Does this now mean that it will be possible to make a dreadnought run away? Will this carry? This is a good question. Will this carry on over into units like tanks? What about a Leman Russ? If a Leman Russ has a leadership value and the Leman Russ loses the combat, does the Leman Russ start taking additional wounds? Does the Leman Russ run away? If the Leman Russ does run away, can it be caught and overrun? Could we see potentially ridiculous scenarios where a grot, or a unit of grots manages to beat a Leman Russ in close combat, and the Leman Russ runs away and is caught and cut down, maybe, or that the Leman Russ starts taking additional wounds because the grots won combat? Is it possible now for grots to win? Is it possible now for a huge blob of Imperial Guardsmen just to smash into a Land Raider and bayonet charge a Land Raider down and kill it? Is that now possible? I don't know. It's just an interesting thing to take into account. I have not yet seen, I could be wrong, but I have not yet seen a morale reveal. I've heard a lot of rumours it's going to be like Battle Shock from Age of Sigmar, which I don't know a huge amount, but I understand that essentially with Battle Shock, for every point you lose combat by, you take an additional wound. Okay. If that's the case, why do we have a leadership value? Anyway, it's just something to take into account. Until I go over the morale video, I'm not going to go too much into depth about this, but all I can say is it looks like there is the possibility that tanks can now be broken, or vehicles can now be broken and overrun, which is interesting. Also, we don't know how many, a Dreadnought, which is a dedicated close combat vehicle, only has 4 attacks on its profile. Does this mean tanks like the Leman Russ will now have attacks? Will Leman Russ be able to do 4 or 5 attacks in close combat? Or, how does it work? How does it work? So that is all. I know I'm asking a lot of questions here, but I feel like this reveal in particular, of all the reveals I've seen so far, this one raises the most questions straight away. Specifically looking at the attack values and the leadership values. I think looking at some positives, if a Dreadnought has a 3+ armor save, then a Leman Russ has surely got to have a 2+ armor save. I mean, you think about it, and a Chimera is going to have like a 3+ armor save, which is pretty cool, and I like that. So I've obviously I've gone on a bit, that's a bit of a negative start. Let's look at some positives. Vehicles and monsters creatures are now on the same playing field. That is awesome. Hallelujah. Praise the Emperor. Praise him. Get on your knees and bow your heads and praise be to the Emperor of mankind. Because that's what everyone's been asking for. A lot of people have been asking, myself included, if they were going to stick with the old way of doing 40k to nerf monsters creatures. And they have now instead decided to kind of buff vehicles in a funny sort of way. Okay, I understand that. Does that mean there won't be a vehicle damage table anymore? Interesting. Does that mean vehicles won't be able to explode anymore? Interesting. Maybe there'll be a rule where if a vehicle is reduced to 0 wounds, it explodes. Who knows? I don't know. Because it was always kind of cool. It was it was kind of cinematic to have that ability to a last cannon round to punch through the front armor of a Rhino, explode, and punch out the back of it. Whilst it was kind of a hindrance, it was pretty cinematic, pretty cool. So we may not have that anymore, which would be a shame. But anyway, so like I said, these new profiles, they raise a lot of questions. Boy, do they raise a lot of questions. I mean, wow. Let's just continue on. Wounds will no longer be capped at 10. So, as it says here, larger vehicles like Land Raiders and Imperial Knights will have dozens of wounds. Okay. That's interesting, to say the least. That is interesting, to say the least. We don't yet know if everything can wound everything. There's a lot of people saying that, a lasgun will be able to wound like an Imperial Knight. Everything will be able to wound everything. If that is true, if everything can wound everything, then I don't really have an issue with things having dozens of wounds, because I will drown it in lasgun fire. I will take 300 guardsmen armed with nothing but lasguns and drown my opponents in lasgun fire. Exaggeration. I probably won't do that. But what I'm saying is, if that's possible, then that's okay. If not, and I know there's talk about las cannons doing like D6 wounds or instead. Okay, that's great, but even if a las cannon, let's look at this Dreadnought, for example, which has 8 wounds. Okay. Let's say you have a las cannon, and in theory that las cannon does D6 wounds, and let's say you shoot it at the Dreadnought and you fails its armor save, and you roll that D6, you get a 1. Okay, no problem. I'll try again, and you get another 1 with another unit. Do you see where I'm getting at with this? Having units which potentially have 30+ wounds, but the anti-tank weapons to bring them down, inflict a random number of wounds, could be a really big fucking problem. In theory, if you have a 30 wound Land Raider, it could take 30 las cannon shots. More. It could take more, because imagine the Land Raider is going to be tough. You're going to have to, that Land Raider could have a toughness value of 10 or something crazy. I mean, if the Dreadnought is toughness 7, what the hell is a Land Raider going to have toughness? What is a Wraith Knight going to have toughness? What is an Imperial Knight going to have toughness? So what you're telling me is it could take the big monster, the big Land Raider will have dozens of wounds, but holy shit, are you going to have like 100 las cannons? Now, not las guns, but las cannons, to just be able to bring down a Land Raider. I mean, surely that's insane. Surely that's stupid. I mean, look at this from an Imperial Guardsman's point of view. We're only going to hit half the time. I mean, a Space Marine hits on a 3+. If a Guardsman hits on a 4+, maybe he only hits on a 5+. I mean, Guardsmen aren't great. Imagine if Guardsmen were only hitting on a 5+. Well, let's go off we're only hitting on a 4+. That means you're going to hit with half of those las cannons. If you've got 20 las cannons, being generous, you hit with 10. And then you've got to try and wound a really, like I said, assuming a Dreadnought's toughness 7, assuming that a Land Raider is going to be toughness 10. That means only a third of your wounds will get through. So now you're looking at 3 wounds, or 3 damages, and then your opponent, the Land Raider, is going to have a 2+ save. He's going to stop a third of the damage, which means you get 2 rolls through, 2 las cannons through. After firing 20 as a Guardsman, you hit with 10, you wound with 3 or 4, you get 2 or 3 wounds through. That could potentially mean that for 20 las cannons, you then roll your 2d6 or your 3d6, and all you get is like 3 1s. That's crippling. Holy shit. We've all had games like that. We've all had games where, the random, you're hitting well and you're wounding well, but you're just not getting the dice rolls you need. That could be absolutely crippling. I mean, trying to take down that wound 8 Dreadnought alone is looking hard. Really hard. So, I know I'm ranting on along about this, and we're barely through the article, and we're already 12 minutes in. I think we're like in the 3rd paragraph. But, holy crap, that could be difficult. That could be a major kick in the nuts for the Guard. If we're going to be relying on las cannons, which shows you d6 wounds, and we're trying to take down a Land Raider which has got 24 to 30 wounds, then fuck me, we're going to struggle. Anyway, I'm not going to go on about that anymore. I think I've made my point clear, but that's how scared I am. Genuinely scared for that. And it makes me worried, because unless everything can wound everything, unless lasguns can wound something, unless everything can wound everything, this is looking like the age of infantry is over, which is a scary thought. Because if the age of infantry is over, then that's just sad. However, silver lining here, guys. If vehicles like the Land Raider, which is pretty tough, is going to have tons of wounds, maybe the Lehman Russ will have 15, 20 wounds. Hello, 2+ armor save, 15 wounds, 20 wounds. That sounds like a recipe for awesomeness. And if vehicles no longer have a rear armor stat, then you can just move however you want, can't you? It's interesting. It's interesting to say the least. Anyway, let's move on. I've made my point there. It looks like infantry could be getting shafted by that, but that guard tanks could be becoming very powerful. Right, let's carry on. Large monsters will have a lot of wounds. There are no super heavy vehicle rules anymore, with the stats going above 10 centimeters now and increasing scale, which means models that previously fell just shy of super heavy stages, like the Gorkanaut, can punch at the appropriate weight and become much more survivable. Okay. Let's look at some stats. So they have an example of a Space Marine who is... The Space Marine is what a Space Marine has always been, which is he can move 6 inches, weapon skill 3, ballistic skill... Weapon skill 3 plus ballistic skill 3 plus strength 4, toughness 4, wounds 1, attacks 1, leadership 7, armor save 3 plus. Okay, let's carry on a little bit more. I'll come back to that. You'll see that the stats are still recognized with 40,000, but with a few changes. Movement stat in exchange for initiative stat. Charging units now strike first. Movement and coordination of your assault army becomes a big factor. You can also see that weapon skill, ballistic skill are now standard rolls, though you can expect modifiers to both of these stats from in-game. Okay, that means that a Space Marine always hits on a 3+ in close combat now. That means Guardsmen are going to always hit on a 4+. But there could be modifiers, which will be... until we see those modifiers, that... From a Guardsman's point of view, the weapon skill stat change doesn't make a huge difference. If Guardsmen have always hit things on a 4+ in close combat. You know, we have a 50-50 chance. It's always been other people hitting us on a 3+. So the weapon skill stat won't actually affect us in a huge way. But I think it'll make a huge difference to other to Space Marine versus Space Marine combat. But we're not bothered about that. We're looking at this from a Guard's point of view. So the weapon skill stat change doesn't make a difference. My only concern is this mention of a Space Marine being leadership 7. That concerns me for what the leadership of a Guardsman's going to be. I imagine a Guardsman, this is me making this up, but looking at a Space Marine stat, a tactical squad Space Marine stat, and comparing it and extrapolating what a Guardsman's stat will probably be, I imagine a Guardsman will have movement 4, weapon skill 4+, ballistic skill 4+, strength 3, toughness 3, wounds 1, attacks 1, leadership 6, save 5+. That's what I guess a Guardsman stat will be. So there you go. So it won't make a huge difference to us. Strength and toughness are still with us and still use an opposing value. Physical, so much higher strength will still win on a 2+, lower strength will still win on a 6+. These aren't capped at 10 anymore either. Wounds is a big one. I expect a lot of models to get more wounds. As you can see, Terminator has 2 wounds now and Guilliman has 9 wounds. Fair enough. They said, don't worry though, stuff still dies quickly with powerful weapons dishing out multiple damage with each hit, but you will, as always, need to shoot the right gun at the right target to get the best effects. Okay. I am hoping that, I've seen what las cannons do. Las cannons do D6 wounds. That's what I've seen. I'm still concerned that shooting... I mean, it's a buff. Las cannons doing multiple wounds is kind of a buff against monstrous creatures, where now you can potentially do 6 wounds to a monstrous creature. That's cool, but it's kind of going to make fighting heavily armored vehicles a fucking nightmare. But anyway, I'm not going to repeat myself. This video has been gone on a bit longer than I thought it would, but this unit profiles reveal has raised a lot of questions. It has raised a huge number of questions, and this reveal has I now have more questions at the end than I did when I started. I am slightly wary, slightly pessimistic after this reveal. I am slightly pessimistic, but we shall see. When stats used to be capped at 10, it did allow for a certain sense of balance. Okay? This is what I'm going to sign off on. When stats were capped at 10, even really OP bullshit fucking units like Wraith Knights and Riptides and stuff, they were still constricted by those rules, by that nothing can be greater than 10 rule in a unit stats. Now that's out the window, there is huge possibility for Games Workshop to exploit that and release models with absolutely retarded levels of stats. It would not surprise me if a Wraith, and this is a slight exaggeration, but also let's think about this. It would not surprise me if a Wraith Knight had 80 wounds. You'll never kill it. Games Workshop, every time they release a new model, all they have to do is, oh, we need this model to sell well, slap on 10 wounds on top of it, on top of what it already has. Oh, okay, here's a 50 wound creature. Here's a 60 wound creature. You say, oh, they'll never have that many wounds, but they will. That's the crazy thing. They will have that many wounds. And that could really be exploited. That could become a real issue if... Put it this way, last thing I'm going to say. I feel like this is a kick in the teeth for infantry. I feel like there's going to be a lot of people asking themselves, what is the point in taking a tactical squad when I can take a Land Raider which has got 40 wounds and is tough? There's going to be a lot of that kind of question being asked. We shall have to see until the full reveal comes out, but I think from an infantryman's point of view, this could be really shit. I think from an armoured player's point of view, this could be really fucking good. But let's see what happens. So, tell me what you guys think. Tell me whether you think this is a good thing or a bad thing. You guys know my opinion on it. I'm sort of a bit about the whole thing. But as always, with these reveals, I think it's really important to get discussion going. Some people may point out some really important things that I've missed. But as always, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please comment and tell me what you guys are thinking. Thank you very much. I'll see you guys next time.